Hi, this is Andy. There's so much focus these days on getting more done with less, delivering faster, increasing efficiency, being excellent at work while rocking it all well at home, too, right? And though I'm all for staying focused and productive, here's something I've observed. One consequence of trying to stay hyper productive and being everything you can possibly be or feel like you should be can be increased stress, less downtime, more hours, more caffeine, less sleep, and all that can lead to burnout. A lot of us are leading lives and teams with batteries that are low on power, so to speak. There's research that finds that over 75% of professionals experience burnout at some point in their careers. And that's a losing proposition for all of us. So, what can we do about that? Well, today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Neha Sangwan. She's the author of a new book entitled Powered by Me: From Burnout to Fully Charged at Work and in Life. It's a book that's not just about the theory of burnout, it's a story of someone who has lived in and made it out and shares lessons we can learn and apply now, regardless of where we are with burnout right now. In today's discussion, you'll get a better idea of what leads to burnout beyond just the typical drivers that come to mind. Neha will give us practical ideas and techniques to help us catch when we're starting to drift towards burnout, and so much more. I'm looking forward to sharing this discussion with you. Hey, before we start, here's a quick question. Do you know someone who's in college or maybe recently graduated? I mean, we all know some people who seemingly knew exactly what they wanted to do with their career at that stage. But I find there's a growing number of people who just dread being asked the question, so what's your plan? When it comes to their career, they have no freaking idea. And if you've been listening to recent episodes, you know that my team and I, we've rolled out a new course entitled just that, No Freaking Idea: How to Navigate Career Uncertainty. It's a career guide for people who are struggling with uncertainty about what do they want to do. And the feedback on the course has been great. So whether it's you that's wondering about next steps in your career, or a son or daughter or someone else that could use perspective, learn more by going to nofreakingidea.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Thanks. Well, let's jump into today's discussion with Neha about her new book, Powered by Me. Neha, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
So great to be here with you, Andy.
All of us are familiar with the term burnout, right? And many have gotten to that point somewhere in life. But let's start with this. What are some of the myths about burnout, whether it be what it is or misconceptions about how we get there? And then how do you like to describe what it really is?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to be totally frank and honest. As a doctor myself, I was really never taught about any of this. And I think the misconceptions people have is that somehow this is some sort of failure on their part, or maybe they're not enough, or they can't hack it, and maybe they're just not going to make it. I don't think anything could be farther from the truth. I really think that burnout is a wake up call. It's a wake up call in people's lives, really getting them to the truest form of their life. And it's actually the opening. It's often like a breach that began on a spiritual level. And by that, I mean when we say yes when we really mean no. When we, choose to stay at work when we miss our children's game. And there's a series of really small choices. They're seemingly small choices that gradually lead us away from what we value most. And then we wake up one day realizing we're just completely adrift and in the middle of the ocean. We don't know where we are. And we don't know how we got there. And really what was so important to me about the last 20 years, I burned out 20 years ago and really committed that I was going to learn what I had not been taught. I was going to learn what medical school and engineering school never taught me. I was going to learn what the world never spoke about. And I was going to own the vulnerability of having burned out and use that experience to maybe help create a survival book for other people. So go ahead.
No, it's a great survival book. It's a great way of saying that. Please continue. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that all those judgments that we have about ourselves or each other, I think what we really have to recognize is that our world is moving faster and faster. And at some point, our biology, which really thrives on routine and exerting itself and then resting, and it biologically functions on feedback mechanisms. Like if you think about your, hormonal system, your hunger, the way our GI system works. We feed it and then we poop it out, right? We have all these ways where it comes in and it goes out. We exert ourselves and then our muscles repair. We sleep and then we get up and we, move and do things. And so if biology requires us to follow these cycles and rhythms, right? We have to function in a world like nature does that. We have seasons. Everything around us is showing us that. But in our collective minds, we've decided this, what you said at the top of the podcast, which is faster is better. And we have these ways of thinking that have gotten us really far off balance.
That's a really good way of saying it. And I love how you share even some of the, as a doctor, how some of those thinking, whether it was taught at school or not, it's just you live in the real world and you just know that this is how it works, or does it? Because I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, all right, let's go burn ourselves out today. Yeah, but we eventually do, all right? We wake up, like you said, we feel like we've hit a brick wall, or we're in the ocean, we're depleted, we're burned out. And when it comes to project management, this guy named Fred Brooks who says, how do projects get to be a year behind schedule? He says, one day at a time. Isn't that true for burnout?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you've learned that, in fact, it was something I took away from the book, that there are some predictable phases on this journey to burnout. How would you describe those phases?
Yeah, and you asked me earlier, so I'll answer both of these questions. You asked me what is burnout. So I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you what the phases are.
Yeah.
So burnout is a triad. So now I'm going to tell you what the research says it is so that we can demystify it. So the first is exhaustion. So that's usually physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. Now, if that's all it was, almost all of the world would be burned out. But that usually goes on for some time. And then there's this creeping in that happens. It's cynicism. And it's where you start trying to kind of adjust. You're starting to hear yourself say things like, it doesn't really matter. I'm not really making a difference. Nothing I do actually really changes things.
There's some depersonalization there, I seem to recall from your book.
Yeah, the depersonalization now, what ends up happening is you start to distance yourself from other people. You start to try to conserve energy biologically, and socially engaging requires some energy. And so that depersonalization, you start to think what I do doesn't really matter, it's not making a difference. And then the third leg is ineffectiveness. So exhaustion, cynicism and depersonalization, and then ineffectiveness. And you don't, show up fully charged on Monday and then you're burned out on Friday, although you can be exhausted by the end of the week for sure. This is actually about patterns that are ongoing in our lives. And we get there gradually, almost like that, proverbial frog in the hot water experience. It goes up a degree and a degree and a degree and a degree, and it doesn't even notice until it's boiled to death. And so the phases of burnout are, the first phase is the alarm phase. And I think of this anytime you take like a big transition, a big step, moving to a new city, going from, high school into perhaps college, or into a new job, or into a new relationship. It's like jumping on a treadmill that's going a little too fast, where your heart starts racing, your blood pressure goes up, you're really a little out of sorts. And that's the alarm phase. Now, that's fine, and our bodies, our physiology is built to handle that. But it's not built to handle that continuously. Remember how I said our biology likes all those cycles and, morning and night and, sleep and wake and all of this. When you get on a treadmill like that and it actually becomes your new pace without the appropriate rest, and you just do that ongoing and sometimes you just keep turning up that treadmill, point one, And before you know it, you're in phase two, which is the adaptation phase. And you've adjusted yourself and your biology, maybe perhaps with 2 cups of coffee a day, some other way that you've used to stay there. Personally, for me, doing 36-hour shifts in the hospital without any sleep, it was 2 16-ounce ice cold Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar, and you could get me to be awake for 36 hours straight. So not good for me, and of course led to my burnout. But at the time, I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about making it through the night. And I was almost, it wasn't just that. I was fueled on sugar, caffeine, and a fear of failure. If I am not alert, someone's going to die here. And so there was just a lot of pressure that was fueling me. So what I'd say is, that's chronic adaptation. And then there came a day, and this is June 17th, 2004 for me, where I walked in the hospital. I was doing my thing for about 5 hours. I turned to a nurse and I said, "Nina, can you please give 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium to the gentleman in 636? And she just looked at me and she said, "Dr. Sangwan, are you okay?" And that was my first indication I might not be. And in that moment, I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "That's the 4th time in less than 5 minutes you've asked me that same question. And I've answered you every time." And what alarmed me the most was I had no recollection of having asked her. And so that would send you into the 3rd phase of burnout, which is ineffectiveness, which is exhaustion, where you slide down the slippery slope of ineffectiveness. So alarm phase, adaptation phase, and exhaustion. And then when you go to the definition, you use the word exhaustion again, but it's a triad: physical, mental, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, depersonalization, and ineffectiveness.
I think so many people listening, as you said, that could be like, "Yep, I recognize. Oh, yep, I recognize that." And it's just one of those things that it's just one day at a time. And I think, there's so many profound ideas in the book, but one is that we're often driven by a desire to measure up in some way or people pleasing. So would you tell us about is it Russo, your dad, and this observation about being powered by the outside?
Well, so interesting. So, our culture plays a role in it, our parents, our family, and anyone who has siblings knows you can grow up in the same family with the very same parents and be very different yourself. And so I was the middle child of 3 girls. Immigrant parents, had an arranged marriage, came over in 1965. And so they didn't know each other, let alone, talk about how you're going to raise children and all of that. I don't remember how old I was when I first started hearing all the adults around me lean down and just say to me, "Neha, are you going to be an engineer or a doctor?" And so I grew up just believing that there were 2 choices. And my dad wanted me to be an engineer. My mom wanted me to be a doctor. I was like, can everybody just stop fighting? They're not mutually exclusive. I'll be a mechanical and biomedical engineer. I'll go into internal medicine. Everybody's going to be happy here. But when I did when I burned out, I really started to reflect on, there was a part of me that when I burned out started to blame my parents, that you guys made me do this and this was too much. But a really wise coach said to me, "Did they really make you do it? Or did you fill out the applications? Did you do the 36-hour calls? Did you do all these things?" And I really was like, you're right. I did them. No one made me. And it was that moment that I realized I must have wanted something more than they wanted me to be an engineer and a doctor. And I really realized that was their love and approval, the Indian community's love and approval. I wanted to be that person that they said, "Oh, wow, an engineer and a doctor?" And when I went back and really reflected on how did I get here? When I was very young, 3 months old, so first of all, you got to understand Indian culture, they pass children around to extended families. Like they're like your mother, your aunt, your sister. Everybody just kind of passes kids around.
Which is beautiful, really, right? When you think
Well,
about
it's an amazing support
it.
system and
Yeah.
extended family and all of that. Well, my grandmother had come to take care of my older sister and me. My older sister's 18 months older than me. Her name's Rithu. And then me, I was born in 1970. And 3 months later, my grandfather got called on assignment from the United Nations to Africa to help them with their agriculture, build a plan to help their agriculture feed their people. Well, he said, Nani, you got to come too, my grandmother. You've got to come too. And she said, all right, I'm bringing Neha, we're coming. So just like that, scoops me up, packs it all up, and takes me to Africa for 2 years. So 2 years later, I think they are my parents, because why wouldn't I?
Why wouldn't you, right? Yeah.
Except my sister, who's now 3.5, and my mother come to pick me up and take me home. So I come back to the US, and I was just crying for 26 days. I wouldn't call my dad, I'd only call him, hey you, potty, hey you, food, hey you. He took 2 weeks off from work, and I finally went to, okay, uncle. So clearly at 2 years old, I was completely turned upside down. Eventually, my father and I obviously connected. But what I realized, then I got really close to my mom's brother, my uncle, Mokumama, and he died in a plane crash when I was 10. And it became very clear to me that if I was getting bullied by my sister as well. She wasn't so thrilled that she had to split her love between our parents now. And I think that must have been hard for her too, because you don't get a baby that you can dress and be a doll. You get a 2-year-old who thinks she's an only child, and you're 3.5.
Right.
So she starts bullying me. All this stuff is going on. I just shut down. No communication, no emotions. I'm just going to please the world. I'm going to listen to anything they want from me, and I'm going to give it to them so that they don't send me away again. So I really went to this default place without ever even knowing it, which was, what did I do wrong? And I think this is the amazing piece. People don't really want to think about their childhood or, go back and kind of understand it. A lot of times what people say to me is, what does my childhood have to do with how I'm leading today?
A lot.
Well, I say, listen, your childhood, your upbringing, the experiences, whether you remember them or not, your amygdala in your brain does remember them. And they have as much relevance to how you lead today as your wardrobe at home has on what you're wearing. It's what you choose from. It's what you know.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's a really big deal. And early on, I just started adjusting myself to make myself safe in my environment and to try not to be sent away again. And it wasn't until my mid-30s that I actually started to reflect and understand where all that people-pleasing came from.
That is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, everyone's situation will be different. So, very few people will have gotten scooped up and taken to another continent. But the fact is, more than we even realize, it's affected us. I love that illustration of what's in our closet affects our wardrobe. Yeah, that's beautiful. I appreciate that. And people need to read the entire book to get the benefit of all the insights about our physical and emotional and social and spiritual energy and how that works when it comes to burnout. But let's talk about deciphering our body's language. You tell us that the body's talking, we're just not often listening. So
Yeah.
what should we be listening for?
Yeah, such a great question. So, right from when we're babies and we're born, whether we get fed, whether we get our diapers changed, or whether we get picked up and get hugs is dependent on us looking to the world around us and influencing them with crying, with doing something funny like laughing, and then we see that other people respond to us. We get claps, we get joy, we get laughter, right? We get hugs and kisses. So from the very beginning, we have focused outward to get our needs met. And once we get a little older, then it's like, look, mom, no hands, or we're impressing our siblings, and then we move into our teenage years and we shift that to our peers. and we care more about what they think. Then we get older and we move into a work environment. Now it becomes about colleagues. Maybe we get in a relationship and now it becomes about our partner. And so the most important thing to know is if you haven't been tuned in to your own body's language and deciphering that, it's because no one ever taught you to do this.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think now, if you've made it this far without your inner data, you've been functioning solely and mostly paying attention to everything outside you. Boy, this is going to be a game change, because your physiology, your heart racing, your stomach turning, your throat constricting, your right shoulder bothering you, sweating, whatever it is, your body's talking to you all the time. The question is, are you listening? And, or how loud does it need to get your attention? So I call this the body map. And each of us has a unique way that our body talks to us. So for example, for me, mine is throat constriction and stomach turning. That's the first way my body starts telling me I'm out of my comfort zone. What would it be for you?
It is, because I reflect on this reading the book. It's my shoulders. Breathing. My breathing becomes more shallow and lighter, and so all I have to do is drop my shoulders and take a deep breath, and it is 5 seconds later I feel different.
You bet. And so what your body is doing is it's usually some form of constriction, and it's trying to literally protect you. So it's actually trying to help you when it does this. Now, I spoke a little bit about our amygdala earlier. So, there's something in your brain called the thalamus, and I think of this as like the hub, where all data from the outside world and the inside world come here. It's almost like what Chicago is for United Airlines. All planes land here, and then they're rerouted. So that data from your own physiology as well as outside world, you're picking it all up. It comes to your thalamus. Sitting right next to it, perched in 2 almond-shaped organs, is the amygdala. We're going to get back to that in a minute. Your data comes in and it goes to your frontal cortex, like imagine where your forehead is. And that's where you make meaning of it. You make sense of it. We're meaning-making machines. We want to figure out what things mean. Once you decide what meaning you're going to make of it, it heads back around to your amygdala. The amygdala is where all stored trauma, fear, emotional experiences are. Now, you may not remember something like, I don't remember leaving at 3 months. I don't remember coming back at 2 years, other than the photos and the stories my loved ones tell me. My amygdala does. It remembers. And so it's perched right near the thalamus, that hub, and it's eavesdropping for anything that might resemble a pattern of something that was really scary before. And so the really interesting thing is when your body starts protecting you and letting you know that you're moving into the unknown or you're moving out of your comfort zone, it's just trying to help you. And so when you realize, oh, there's no danger here, like I'm okay, like I'm gonna do this, and you literally unhook like you just did, where you know that the way that your body does it is tightness in your shoulders and shallow breath. So you actually have the ability to override that. So when you're like, oh, thank you, body. Thanks for letting me know I'm getting out of my comfort zone. Maybe someone said, hey, Andy, can we talk about what happened yesterday? And you're like, and then you're like, okay, I got this. And so you take a few deep breaths, you walk around, you say, give me 5 minutes and I'll be ready to talk. You take a nice walk, you do a few slow deep breaths, you drop your shoulders. Now you walk into that conversation and you've told your body, we're okay here. Otherwise, you're going to come more from a contracted, guarded, fearful, reactive space rather than an open, creative space. And so that's an incredible power that we have within us. And I think something really worth mentioning is people don't really realize that your breath is something that happens automatically when you're asleep, and you don't even need to think about it. But you have voluntary control over it as well. And that's the power. The power is when you realize you're feeling nervous, you realize you're tensing up, your chest feels more constricted, whatever it is, you actually can soften your abdomen, drop your shoulders, and as you breathe in, imagine your abdomen expanding like a balloon. That's how deep you're breathing. And then when you exhale, move your belly button back towards your spine, and then you do it again. And after 3 of those breaths, you actually expand your body instead of letting it contract. And when you soften the muscles of your abdomen, all the muscles of your body relax.
I'm thinking, Neha, of almost like if I'm going to a neighbor's door and knocking, I don't want to knock too loud at first, right? So knock, knock. And if they don't come to the door, and knock a little louder, knock a little louder. At some point, if I really have to get it, it's like pump, pump, pump. I think of that with the body sometimes. Isn't that kind of it starts as the shoulders are tense, and I don't want to overstate that I'm so mindful that I pick up on it right away, but I'm getting better at it. But that's because there's been enough knocking. And at one point, for me, my story wasn't 20 years ago. It was more like 2 to 3 years ago, where I felt like heart palpitations were what was knocking on my door. And I'm like, that can't be right. and then as soon as you start thinking about your heart palpitations, you think about them more. And at some point, I decided to go to a cardiologist, and he goes, "I'm so glad you came, because sometimes just getting tested can be curative." And I think what he was really saying was, I think what he was really saying was that if you just, let's be curious. What's that knocking at the door? Like you said, it's an opportunity to learn. It's, but we have to listen. And if we don't listen, the body's going to knock louder. I mean, do you think that's a reasonable metaphor?
Oh my gosh, so many things. So there's 2 things I want to zero in on here. First of all, you're right. Your body's polite. Like, it starts with a whisper, just that little annoying twitch in your shoulder, maybe, and you're like, oh, no, I can't deal with that. Like, I got to keep going. And then it progresses up to neck and shoulder pain, and you still keep powering through. Pretty soon, by the time you get home, you got a splitting headache, right? And then what we do at the end is we blame our body for it. We didn't pick up the signals.
Right.
And then we're like, oh, I wish I didn't have this headache. But your body is doing a lot of things. Sometimes it has to knock you over the head with a 2x4 before it knocks you out and you're sick in bed. But here's the thing. If you learn to start picking up the signals, and they're unique, for your body has a unique language that it speaks to you in. Other people I've talked to don't say anything about throat constriction or stomach turning. That's like unique, right? So you gotta, no one can do this for you, is what I'm saying. And when the body talks to you, there's many different ways it chats with you. Sometimes it just wants to chat. It wants to be your friend. That's like constant. It's basically saying, it gives you the goosebumps when something resonates, like, oh my gosh, that really touched me. Sometimes you feel the tension, like, oh, I don't know, I walked into this room and this doesn't feel right. So your body is constantly trying to talk to you through physical sensations and give you guidance. Then there's a way that it talks to you when you're chronically depleted. Like, you start to feel exhaustion, and suddenly the weekend is not enough to recover. And then there's times where it talks to you and you're having a full-blown heart attack. And it's strong, it's intense, and it's unrelenting. And so there's lots of different ways it can talk to you. But here's what I wish doctors would say, and yours sounded quite wise. When somebody comes in, and first of all, I'd say, whenever you have physical symptoms, signs, signals, always get them checked out, okay? Because they can mean something other than burnout. They can be a physical breakdown of your body starting. It can be an early signal that can help save your life. So get a clean bill of health. Once you get a clean bill of health, if your provider says anything along the lines of, you're fine, nothing's wrong with you, but you know that there's something that doesn't feel quite right, that's when you start to wonder, like, what else might this be? And so what I wish doctors would say, and this is something I teach as many of them as I can I wish they would say, let's say you came in for chest pain and I ran a battery of tests, I checked your EKG, I checked your blood levels, there's no heart attack, and your heart is pumping really well. I check an echocardiogram. What I would like them to say, first, instead of saying, you're fine, is I'd like them to say, we've got some good news and bad news. The good news is, physically, your heart is strong, the electrical rhythm is doing great, and the pumping is good, so your heart is physically well. Here's the bad news. There's something going on a mental, emotional, social, or spiritual level that is showing up in your body, trying to get your attention. Do you have any idea what that might be?
That's good.
Because when we don't acknowledge that nobody of their own, desire wakes up in the morning and thinks, you know what I'd really like to do? Sit in the ER today.
Right.
What I'd really like to do is end up in a hospital or a doctor's office today. Nobody says that. So if they're there, it means something's happening. And just because we didn't learn about it in medical school doesn't mean it's not true for them. And I think that's a lot of the reason people have started turning to alternative therapies and other aspects, because we look them in the face and say, you're fine.
Right.
But they don't feel fine.
Or here's a pill, and
Yep.
it doesn't get to what's really causing it. And I'm not against medication. I'm just saying there's times where that just is a salve, right? It doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, I take thyroid medication every day because I have an autoimmune experience and my thyroid needs help. And you really want to ask yourself, medications have often, you want to ask yourself, is this medication something that I can use as a temporary bridge to get me through while I simultaneously explore what's the root cause of what's happening? And so I really want us to be thinking about both of those paths at the same time. And there may come a time then, if you decrease your stress level, get to the root of whatever's ailing you, that you may be able to wean off of a medication. But that's something you do with your provider.
Yeah. I often think of coping strategies as a bad thing, but you actually say in your book that you like to thank your coping strategies. So the reason I thought about this was, for me, it used to be, maybe if I didn't pick up on my shoulders or my breathing, I could pick up because I got my head in a bag of something salty. Like that would be. And I think you said one of your coping strategies was chocoholic, if you let yourself, or forbidden foods or something like that. So, what are some of your personal coping strategies, maybe that I didn't mention, and how does it help us if we can kind of learn to recognize these?
Yeah. Well, listen, food is definitely one of mine. After I had some food sensitivities, in order to heal, I had to go off gluten and dairy. But I have to tell you, if someone said to me, if you could only eat two things for the rest of your life, what would it be? It would be ice cream and cheese.
So there's dairy.
Yeah. And so it's been, I've been lucky enough to find coconut ice cream and, other ways that I can still enjoy it. But what I'll say is coping mechanisms, the reason we adjust, just like I was a little girl at 2 years old, were worried about how I was going to fit and how I was going to deal with the pain and grief inside me of leaving my grandparents and someone who was bigger than me bullying me. And so in those moments, I adjust to soothe and take care of me without any conscious knowing that this is a coping mechanism that I'm developing. It's kind of miraculous. The reason I thank them is, aren't we amazing? We live through so much trauma. We live through so much stress in our lives. And we're these miraculous beings that figure out how to endure it, how to adjust, if you grew up in a household where there was a lot of yelling, or there was nothing at all and everyone acted like everything was perfect and there was no emotions. There's a place that I say, emotions are energy in motion, and they need to be revealed, felt, and healed. Reveal, feel, and heal it, right? Feel it, reveal it, heal it. And so when we can't do that and they get stuck inside of us, there's ways we need to soothe ourselves. And that's about survival. And so what I do is I say, when you have uncomfortable sensations in your body and you don't know how to handle them, and you came up with a way to, like a glass of wine, to take the edge off your day. And then during the pandemic, if you somehow noticed it became like a glass or two, or just hand me the bottle, please, right? When you're increasing, you notice yourself going from 1 cup of coffee a day, or for me, it's chai, coconut milk chai. When I start needing 2 or 3 of them, that's my awareness. Because people can see, oh, it's not a big deal. I have 1 cup of coffee. Oh, and we walk in and we say, make it a double. Those are the moments that your stress has just ramped up and you want to be paying attention to it. So I'm not mad at coping strategies. I think they're incredible, whether they're retail therapy, whether they're binge watching Netflix or some games or some show, whether they're, drinking or eating something, whether it's alcohol, whatever it is. These are the ways we made it through tough times, and we should really thank ourselves for being creative. Gabor Mate is a grief and addiction specialist, and he says something that just blew my mind. He said, I don't ask why the addiction, he takes care of addiction as well. He said, I don't ask why the addiction. For God's sake, I thank the addiction, because the addiction helped you survive something that was much, much worse. I don't want to know why the addiction. I want to know what's the pain. And so what I'd say to people is, if stress causes or exacerbates more than 80% of illness, because it does, I want to know what's at the root of your stress. And so I came up with a 5-step awareness prescription. And I'd love to share that with the listeners.
Yes, please, yeah.
So the night before I discharged patients and I had stabilized them physically, I was a hospital physician, I would, back in the day, it was the early 2000s, I would pull my prescription pad out of my pocket because it happened to be the only thing I could write on, a pen and that. And so that's why it became the awareness prescription. And so I would say, listen, stress causes or exacerbates more than 80% of all illness. I want to see you again. I just don't want to see you in the emergency department again. I want to see you at the theater or at the grocery store. So I'm going to give you 5 questions. And if you journal on these, and the nurse pages me tomorrow and lets me know, I'm going to give you an extra 20 minutes for us to get to the root of what's your stress. So I stopped counting after 2,700 of them, but I did this with well over 7,000 of them. But the first 2,700, every single person did it, and every single person knew why they were stressed. And so these are the 5 questions that I ask my patients that I wish more doctors would ask theirs. So question number 1, why this? Why a heart attack? Why not your liver? Why not your left leg? Tell me why this part of your body is breaking down. What is the significance of that? And by the way, any answer is the right answer. So whatever comes to you as you're writing this, that's the right answer. Question number 2, why now? Why not 3 years ago? Why not 2 weeks from now? What's the message your body needed you to get in this moment that you may not have been getting? Question number 3. Since hindsight's 2020, what signals, patterns, messages, intuition, what might you have missed along the way that now makes perfect sense? Question number 4. What else in your life needs to be healed? And question number 5. If you spoke from the heart, what would you say to me? And boy, did we have tears. Boy, was I the doctor who didn't leave until 10 p.m. at night. But I have to tell you, it gave me the engineer in me who wanted to solve root cause issues. It felt like I was bridging someone through a crisis, but now we could turn that crisis into meaning. Because maybe just maybe, they would pick up the signals earlier next time. Maybe they could realize what's at the root of their stress and begin working on that. And so, yes, I gave them an assessment and plan. I gave them, whatever meds I needed to give them 3 times a day and see me in 2 weeks. But probably the biggest change I ever noticed was in them saying to me, it went from people saying, thank you for saving my dad from a heart attack, flowers, chocolates, cards, all of those things, to the patients themselves showing back up at the hospital to see me, or writing me a note or a letter saying, Doc, you're never going to believe this. I got out of that relationship that I told you was the biggest stressor, and I can sleep through the night without medication. You're never going to believe this, but my back pain is gone. You're never going to believe this, but my migraines, I'm on half the medication now. You're never going to believe this, I'm off my blood pressure medicines. And when I started getting those letters, that feedback from people, that's when I knew I was onto something.
That is so cool. I'm so glad you shared that. We're not doctors, but here's a thought: is a lot of the book is around what we can do to help ourselves, which even by the name of the book, powered by me. But many of the people listening to us are leading teams of people as well. So you mentioned in the book about how dysfunctional healthcare can be, and I'm sure you've seen that far beyond the halls of medicine too. Can you think of anything that we can do as leaders to minimize the likelihood of, let's say, causing burnout, or maybe recognizing, or anything we can do for the people we lead?
Oh, you bet. So first of all, I think, so when I work with corporate teams, one of the biggest complaints leaders have to me is that they spend more than half of their time taking care of other people's interpersonal issues. And they don't have time to do the job that they are supposed to be doing. So the first thing I'd say is, this information is not just for you as leaders. This information, the new paradigm, I believe, is not that one leader is responsible to know 10 other people and what gets them out of their comfort zone and what their career path is and what their purpose is and how to help them navigate. I think it's about those 11 people all knowing one person, which is themselves. So the first thing I'd say is, if you find this valuable, invest in your teams being able to have this information for themselves. Because think about it. If those 10 people that you lead know one person, which is themselves, really well, they can come to you as a leader and say, you know what, yesterday I was a little out of my comfort zone in that meeting. That's why I didn't speak up. What I'd really like to make sure gets, contemplated is this. Can you help me? Now a leader can really use their skills, their strategic skills, their thinking skills. All right, so that's the first thing I'd say. I don't think we should train all leaders and not train people. I think we need to invest in everybody being able to navigate and become more agile, resourceful, all of that. The second thing I'd say is how you think about the diversity on your team in behavior. So we all think differently. We process information differently. And so in the book, there's a chapter that I call Navigating We. And I speak about it as, let's think about behavioral styles, work styles, really kind of how we process information and accomplish and execute our work. So there's leaders, I want you to think about someone on your team that's the doer. And it might be you. But it's the person who values tasks, accomplishment, checking things off their to-do list, getting things done. That's where they get their adrenaline rush. Now, they move fast, usually. And if they had a motto, it would be, just do it. Why are we all messing around here? Why are we chit-chatting at the water cooler? Just do it. But here's the kicker. And if they were a car, they would be a Hummer, a tank, anything that they are going to get over the finish line. They're going to be on or under budget. And they're the people that no matter what, are going to get it done. Now, here's the kicker. Their greatest fear is a vulnerability. And they oftentimes work so they don't have to feel. And they might be the ones who go, Why are you getting all emotional? Like, stop that stuff. Like, ugh, what is that? Yeah, because you know what? That slows them down. And that also, their greatest fear is vulnerability. And when someone else is emotional, what does it do? Mirror neurons have us feel it as well. So you've got the doers there, and you got to understand they've got great qualities. You need them on your team. And they're also coming from a place of a little more guarding. And then we move into the second style, which is the thinkers. And the thinkers on your team are the ones who are complex problem solvers. They move a little slower, but when everyone else is like, oh God, I don't know how we're going to solve that, they move toward the problem. So if they had a motto, it would be do it once and do it right. They're methodical. They are analytical. They love numbers, data. Okay, they're the ones who are going to like unravel this snarled accounting ledger and love it. So they're very, very valuable on your team. If they were a car, they'd be a Prius, because they would have thought through value for your money, the environment, the carpool sticker that they get. You know, they would have thought through it all. Now, what are they afraid of? Well, they are really afraid of looking foolish. And so they want the do it once, do it right. And so they may take too long. They may miss deadlines. And the doer's like, come on, come on. And you start to get this friction on a team because they want to make sure we do it right and don't look foolish, while the doers are like, we're going to miss the deadline. Okay. So then you move into, it's like every single meeting. Okay. Then you move into the third behavioral style, and that's the seers. And the seers, their currency is innovation, possibility, ideas. They're often the forward-thinking change makers on your team. They're lobbing in some crazy ideas, and the thinkers are thinking, you've got to be kidding me, that's not even humanly possible. The doers are like, which one of all of these ideas are we actually going to execute, and when can I get started? Right? And then there is their fear. So the seers, they move quite quickly. Okay, they move pretty fast. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this? They love whiteboards, by the way, too. And their motto is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And so that's Walt Disney. And so they're all about what's possible. Now, their greatest fear? Oh, I better tell you if they were a car. If they were a car, they would be a red cyber Tesla truck. Okay. Now, why? Because first of all, it doesn't come in red. And they would have had a custom paint job done. They like to be a little unique and aesthetic. They're kind of the ones who have cool socks, a nice watch, like just one thing that just makes them a little different and unique and novel from everybody else. Now, their greatest fear. Now, their greatest fear is that they love all possibilities and ideas. So actually committing and agreeing to making one real, they aren't so hot on commitment. So their greatest fear is of being trapped into one idea. And so they're going to be the ones a little squirmy, like not making the clearest agreements. And what about this? And maybe we should do that. And you're going to get that dynamic. And then lastly, there's the feelers on your team. They're the ones who care about relationship, people. They're the glue of the team. And so they're going to say something like, Andy hasn't said anything the entire meeting. And everybody's like, wait, like the doers are like, we almost got to go. And the thinkers are going to be like, who cares? Like, Andy, like I got all the data I need. And the seers are like, Andy, who's Andy? Like, but the feelers, boy, the feelers want everybody to move forward together. And so they're the glue of the team, and they're going to pick up on things even before sometimes those people will pick up on it themselves. And so they're really valuable. Well, here's the thing. Their greatest fear is of rejection, that someone would make fun of them. They're much more emotional. So if a doer discounts them or someone else, boy, that feeler isn't going to hear anything else that's going on in the meeting except that that was disrespectful. And so the beauty of it all is, what I'd say is, notice which one or ones of these you really resonate with, and figure out which one you default to under stress. Now, I'd say I'm a seer feeler. Now, it's true. Listen, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I certainly am a thinker, and I'm a doer. I'm a businesswoman, I have my own company, all of these things. But I will tell you, under stress, I care more about someone else being okay. Um, and I really like, being different and being innovative and all of that. So, but I'd say probably at the core, I'm a feeler. That little girl who felt rejected when she was 2,
Yeah.
and became such a people pleaser because of it,
Yeah.
that's probably my core. I'm probably a feeler. That's why I'm a healer. That's why I'm in medicine. That's why now I'm a coach,
Right.
right? And that's why probably the most fun of all this work in writing this book for 6.5 years is now I get to go out and sign books and be with people and spread the message,
Right.
Now I get to do it.
So
So,
good.
so yeah. So what I'd say to leaders is really become aware yourself first of who you are and what your greatest fear is. Because you may be shutting down. The best teams are whole brain teams. Doer, thinker, seer, feeler on every team. You know why? You'll get it done on time and under budget. There's your doer.
Yeah.
You'll do it once and do it right. There's your thinker. You'll have an innovative service, product, whatever it is, because that's your seer. And everybody will feel like they belong, and you'll have collaboration and innovation from a team. And that's your feeler. So I'd say, whoever you think is the toughest person on your team, I'd ask you if you pay attention to actually if it has something to do with your greatest fear.
That's so good. Man, that's a lot to think about. There's so many more things I'd love to talk to you about, Neha. But let's end with this question, because we have a lot of parents who listen to the podcast, and I'm just thinking, are there some things that parents could do to help their kids be more inside out, so to speak, more attuned to their internal GPS and aligned with their values?
Oh my gosh. Here's what I'll say. Children still listen to their body, right? They cry when they need to eat, sleep, or poop. Like they're not trying to make it hard for you. Their body is talking and they're listening. And if your kid is playing just fine, maybe with their brother or their sister, and you say it's time to go to school, and they say, but I have a tummy ache, I can't go. Most parents say, I just saw you playing with your brother, you're fine, go to school. Here's what I want you to know, parents. There's something going on that bus, or at that cafeteria, or that place, that they have a tummy ache now. They're not trying to get out of it. Their body is talking and trying to protect them because something else is happening. But we beat it out of them. And so one of the things I'd say is, just like I spoke about the doer, thinker, seer, feeler on a team, if you have a child that's very different, a different style than you, please don't try to make them you. Please honor that they have a different way of integrating data, a different fear that they might be operating on. And how is it that you can ask them, what is your soul here to teach me? Rather than, how do I make you more like me? Let me tell you how it is and let me show you and you become like me. So I'd say, how comfortable are you, parent, drawing healthy boundaries, navigating your emotions, communicating in conflict? And how honest are you with your children? Because they will grow up and be as honest with you as you are with them. And so I'd say to parents, the biggest thing is, please learn to navigate your emotions. Don't try to stop theirs.
I think it was an amazing story you tell in your TEDx talk about, I think it was the organizer of the Saudi conference that wanted to talk with you and just say, I'm concerned, if I remember the story, I'm concerned about my daughter. I just don't know if she has what it takes, because you, Neha, Dr. Neha, you have it all together, but she cries, right? She cries.
Yeah.
And would you mind sharing the insight that you gave him?
Sure. Yeah, when he said, can you please help her because you're so strong, you travel across the world, you speak to different cultures and people, and she cries, she's so weak. And I said to him, we were in a car full of other people, and I said, are you sure you'd like me to say this now?
Right.
And he said, yes, I want you to tell me now. And I said, well, what if I don't think it's about her? And he said, well, then who would it be about? And I said, you know, you are a pediatric cardiologist, electrophysiologist, meaning he takes care of the electrical rhythms on babies' hearts and ablates those if they're abnormal, right? And I said, you have a team of people that revere you and respect you. You have called together an international group of scientists to come to Saudi Arabia and speak. I've met your family. They revere you. I'm wondering if when your daughter cries, it might be one of the only times in the world where you're not in control. And I wonder if that weakness that you're saying is hers might be what you feel in the presence of your daughter's tears. And boy, was that the longest 1 minute of silence I have ever sat in my life. And then he said, this is exactly right. This is exactly right. And I have a lot to learn about communication. Will you come back again? And 2 years later, I came back again to Saudi Arabia to help teach them about communication. So
I love that. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that story. And once again, it's not to heap it all on the parents, but it's just to remind us that there's more going on with this for ourselves and the people around us. And for those listening, I don't know where you are right now when it comes to burnout, but it's clear from research that this is something that most of us will struggle with somewhere during our careers. And if you'd like to tap into the wisdom that Neha's talking about today, get a copy of her new book, Powered by Me. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So Neha, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
it has been such an honor and a delight. Thank you, Andy.